Hey, this is Draffet, and this is Draffet Store. I'm doing it this week on Bigfoot. Now, with that, I know about the Colorado shootings. Everybody's probably doing a video on it, but I'm not. First off, you don't want to hear my opinion on it. You really don't. Second off, I want to keep a schedule. Now, with that said, like I said, there's something happening here called the Michigan Bigfoot Bash. I have no affiliation or monetary gain out of this. It's just something I thought was cool. It's being held at the Michigan Magazine Museum in Fairview and Cummings on M33. I'm looking at the website, so we give a decent idea where it's at. Now, if I had transportation, me and the wife would be at least one day this weekend. We'd be going out that way and taking the kid and taking a look at it. But with that, let's get into Bigfoot. Yes, I believe in Bigfoot. I find it hard not to with all the animals and plants and everything that have been popping up that people have said are either extinct or don't exist or weren't even sure that exists. Okay, I mean, complete with. I was watching Destination Truth over the last couple weeks, and they were doing something in Vietnam on a creature there, and they brought up the fact that 300-pound with a buffalo-like creature could be hidden for so long that nobody knew it existed. It was just found within the last 20 years. China had a similar situation where they deforested their like they like to call it now, rainforest, but technically they're jungles, and they found an antelope that has gills on the side that was thought to be Chinese myth. Okay, you got the bonobo monkey, or not monkey, chimpanzee. That scientists were like, why is this chimp having so much sex when most great apes only mate when it's mating season? Come to find out, it's another species of chimpanzee. So if we can, believe that something, a chimpanzee, which generally roughly stands about 6 feet to 6 feet 5 inches and 300 pounds, missed it for the better part, of however long, we've actually known about chimpanzees in a whole being around. I think a 6.5 foot to 8.5 tall bipedal humanoid could, go misplaced for a while. And a lot of people would be skeptical about it and all that. Colorado, the Rocky Mountains from Colorado to the Pacific, A, is a rugged area. B, you could hide a lot of stuff because there is a lot of untraversed, because of the mountains, a lot of untraversed woodlands in there. And lastly, when the area of it is huge. I mean, you're going from Northern California up to Washington into Canada, and there's, acres upon acres of untraversed land in Canada alone that could hide a creature like this. You've got in Canada they still have bison populations. So you've got bison in Canada. You've got deer, moose, fish. You have a lot of food to support this. Think of the bear population. Okay, Kodiaks, black bears, and grizzlies all get roughly, if they stand on their two hind legs, roughly about 8 feet tall. 7.5 to 8 feet tall. Some in the upwards of 9 feet tall. So if an animal that huge can feed and survive, so can something like Bigfoot. I mean, I don't care what scientists say. It ends up being their ignorance, because based on, especially American scientists, it ends up being ignorance based on their lack of wanting to go in the field. Now, that said, Russian scientists, and this one was in the newspaper and on Yahoo, the Russian scientists have actually gone out of the way to prove that their version of Bigfoot exists by going out into the field. Just recently, I can't remember the college here. I want to say it's Boston, but I'm not sure. Within the last couple of weeks, started looking into the credibility of it. Okay, one of how many hundreds of colleges in the country of scientists that discredit it. I mean, Dr. Muldrum and a few others like him are a few of the rare breed that still believe that it exists and go out of their way to look for it. No, I don't agree that it's a bipedal hominid like they say, or like Dr. Muldrum's theories go into. I believe it's closer to man. Now, the reason why I say that is the following. One, it has a lot of characteristics of man. If man doesn't want to be found, it goes out of its way to hide. Two, it watches people from a distance to see how interactions. That doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't interactions, because there's different types of Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever the term you want to use throughout the U.S. and Canada. Alright, in Canada and out west, it's roughly 6.5 to 8 feet tall. Here in Michigan, they're actually 6.5 feet tall, maybe 7.5 feet tall, because of the terrain. In the Midwest, from Indiana down, it's more man-like, just looks like a hairy human. I mean, uber hairy human, and very violent. Then, like I said, through the swamps of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, you have the skunk ape, which is more primate-looking. Okay. Now, here in the current trend started not too long after World War II, after a logger out west found prints around his equipment, which ended up being, so many years later, ended up being found out that it was a hoax. But legends go back at least 150 to 200 years for white men. Longer than that for the Indian populations, especially in Washington. And scientists have all sorts of different theories on what it is. Indian that just went, uber native to, misdiagnosis or identification of a grizzly or a bear, of some other form of bear by either sitting or standing. Well, first off, bears' feet are kind of small, so if you see something sitting like a human being, it's a good chance it's not a bear, because bears don't sit. Technically, all the pictures I've seen of bears, they don't sit like that, especially grabbing a knee and just kind of like this. Their arms and legs are not that long. And they don't throw things. Their paws are not set up to grab and hold and throw. and some of these rocks, and it was, well, it could be a raccoon. You know, raccoons and squirrels throw things. Some of the size of the rocks that have been thrown, you know, are as big as my hand. Okay, I don't think a 2 foot long raccoon, maybe at the tops of 40 pounds, is going to pick up a rock the size of this case and heft it a good 30 or 40 feet. Okay, and you know, that's rock throwing, stick throwing, sounds that don't sound like native animals like caribou or buffalo or, you know, moose calls. They sound more primatal in their tones, or, you know, hard to say, well, where it is. Then you have fur samples that scientists can't, that have been Monster Quest and Finding Bigfoot have sent in, and there's like, we can't pinpoint what kind of animal it is. And it's not that it's degraded that they can't, it's there's no known sample in their database to prove what it is. Bigfoot casting of the foot, you know, yes, you can make a foot, you know, cast, but it's going to have, you know, if you actually do it well, you know, with wood, you're going to have the texture of the wood, not the ridging like on the bottom of your feet, and the direction of the ridging on the bottom of the feet. Patterson film, great footage. I believe it's real, because there's three major reasons. One, there's two guys that are doing the documentary, stumble across a creature by accident. Yes, they could have, in a very remote part of California, that they, you know, nobody could prove that it was a suit, for one, because they haven't had a person come out and go, yeah, I got the suit, here it is, the whole 9 yards. Two, the muscle tone in the costume is different than what you would see in Hollywood costume of the type back then. Most of the Hollywood costumes back then were, if you actually look at the budget, even the big budget movies back then, were monkey suits, where you could tell it was a monkey suit. Okay, this had the girth of and proportionate movement of a live animal, not the guy in a monkey suit where occasionally, you know, part of the monkey suit flaps when he moves. Okay, it had the girth of a live animal. And lastly, why would two guys just decide to make a female costume? It's like, you have so much more you have to put into it, where a male costume is simpler because it's, well, man, you have no, yeah, you know, and the video shows boobies. All right, and then I mean, there's so much, you know, like I said, you can see muscle tone, movement in the thing, the hair consistency where it actually blends from a darker to a lighter, which is consistent to a live animal over a costume of the day and age, because, you know, they didn't do blending. Blending wasn't, you know, more or less until Harry and the Hendersons, which is like 15 years late, give or take 15 years later. Okay, Hollywood at the time could only do hands and head. That's why Planet of the Apes, from here down, had no fur covering it. They were all in costume because they couldn't do the body costuming to make it look realistic, or as realistic as they could. Now, most skeptics don't bother going out and looking at that information. They just assume that, well, this is, you know, why it was, and it's got to be this, because some scientist said that they didn't get his ass out of a laboratory and looked at it and goes, man, it's fake. I'm sorry. if something was given to me like that, I'd go out of my way and you do hundreds of hours of not just video, go out into the area that they're at and find out what is possible in that area. Other than just opening my mouth and saying it's not possible because it doesn't have the foliage, it doesn't have the... Get your ass out of a laboratory and go prove it. And lastly, the reason why I believe that it exists is there's too many types of these animals worldwide. Okay, you have Sumatra as a small hobbit-like version of Bigfoot. You have the Yeti in the Himalayas through Tibet, Nepal, and China, and part of Russia. The Russian wild man. Even Europe has, in the mountain ranges, has some type of creature like this. The only area I've never heard of is Africa, but that doesn't mean that they don't. South America has a version of it, which I forget the name of it. Yahweh in Australia, which has no indigenous monkey population, chimpanzee population, or great ape population, has one, and they have roughly about 1,000 to 2,000 sightings a year, which is equivalent to half of, the sightings a year that the United States and Canada put out. Okay, half, and it's half the it's okay. The footage, well, you don't understand what I'm saying. Which encompasses rock throwing, stone throwing, growls, and even people have seen it come up to the thing, and it's actually really aggressive. And Aboriginals of Australia have had legends of it going back hundreds of years, to where that they had tribal wars with this creature. So, do I believe Bigfoot exists? Yes. Until we deforest, and here's my thing, until we deforest the whole world and prove that all of these animals don't exist, and that Bigfoot doesn't exist, it exists, in my mind. Now, the reason why we can't find a body, and which is the biggest proof, is anybody that finds it gets discredited right away because it's a Bigfoot body. Okay. 2. Nature takes care of itself. Monster Quest actually had video of a deer carcass and how long a deer carcass took to be very hard to find in the wild. Okay, and it took roughly 3 to 4 days to be undistinguishable what type of carcass it was because of insects, animals, and such. 3. Man only goes where man has easily accessible terrain too. Most people only follow pathways in the wild that are easy for them to get in and out, easy in case there's an emergency for other people to get in and out and help, and about 3 or 4 other situations. We rarely go into really deep forested areas because, well, we're just like that. And lastly, and this is the big one, if it's close to man has a tendency to bury its dead. Not always. Sometimes we just leave the dead there, but we have a tendency to bury it out of respect. Now, if it's so hard to find, there's a good chance the reason why is it's close to man and it buries its dead. Okay, so which would make finding it really, really hard, because now on top of trying to find a body, you have to find a burial ground or some type of burial area. Now you can say, well, no, that's not the case. Up until the last 60 years, there was a legend of the elephant, and this is where I'm ending it. The legend of the elephant burial grounds, where elephants would go and die. everybody was disproved, you know, European and American trackers and such did not believe that he ever existed until it was found. So until we find Bigfoot, and, well, whoever's blocking it to be found, I will always believe. With that, this is Draffets Store. Have fun.